in the fading light of an autumn evening. Captain Alistair Finch stepped off the train, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The war was over, a brutal, years-long affair that had stolen his youth, but not his hope. Clutched in his hand was a worn, creased photograph of Clara, her smile, the beacon that had guided him through the darkest trenches and bloodiest battles. For 5 years, her letters were his lifeline, her promises the armor around his soul. He was finally home, ready to claim the future they had so desperately dreamed of. The air in his hometown of Meadow Creek felt different, heavier. The familiar streets seemed to whisper secrets he wasn't privy to. He walked past the old oak tree where they'd carved their initials. A lifetime ago, it seemed. He remembered her last letter, filled with reassurances of her undying love, her patient waiting. It had arrived just weeks before the armistice was signed. He had read it until the ink blurred, the paper softened by his constant touch. Now, he was just a short walk from her door, from the beginning of their forever. As he rounded the corner onto Elm Street, the sight that greeted him froze the very blood in his veins. The Hemlock House, Clara's home, was aglow with lights and music. Laughter spilled out onto the manicured lawn. It looked like a celebration. His steps slowed, a cold dread seeping into his bones, a feeling far more terrifying than any he'd faced on the battlefield. Through the large bay window, he saw her, Clara. She was breathtaking, radiant in a shimmering gown, more beautiful than his memories could ever capture. But she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, his hand possessively on her waist, was a man Alistair had never seen before. A man with a confident smile and an expensive suit. Hazewachat? The man leaned in and whispered something in her ear, and Clara laughed, a sound that once belonged only to him. Then, the man raised her hand to his lips, and a diamond ring on her finger caught the light, sparkling with a promise that shattered Alistair's world into a million irreparable pieces. The celebration wasn't just any party, it was their engagement party. He stumbled back into the shadows, the photograph of Clara falling from his numb fingers. The smiling face in the picture was a ghost, a cruel mockery of the woman in the window. How could this be? Her letters, her vows of eternal love were. They all lies. The hope that had sustained him, that had been his shield against despair, crumbled into dust. He was a decorated war hero, a man who had faced death and emerged victorious. But standing there, in the quiet darkness of his own hometown, Alistair Finch felt utterly and completely defeated. Days turned into a blur of confusion and heartache. Alistair couldn't bring himself to confront her. What was there to say? He saw them around town, Clara and her fiancé, a wealthy industrialist named Julian Croft. Julian had never seen a day of combat. While Alistair was fighting for his country, Julian was building an empire, the townspeople whispered. Some may wheat, pity others, with a hint of gossip-fueled excitement. They spoke of how Julian had swept in, how his wealth had secured her family's future, how Clara had simply moved on. Moved on. The words were like daggers to Alistair's heart. One afternoon, unable to bear the confines of his empty house, he walked to the old bridge over Willow Creek, their special place, and there she was. Clara stood alone, gazing into the water, her expression unreadable. This was Italiano, the moment he had both dreaded and craved. He approached slowly, the crunch of gravel under his boots announcing his presence. She turned, and for a second, he saw a flicker of the girl. He knew a flash of panic, of regret, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a mask of polite composure. Alistair, she said, her voice a fragile whisper. You're back. He just nodded, his throat too tight for words. He wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to show her the tattered letters he still carried, a testament to a love she had so easily discarded. I heard about your engagement, he managed to say, the words tasting like ash. I'm happy for you. It was the biggest lie he had ever told. Clara's eyes welled with tears she refused to let fall. The war, it changed everything, Alistair. It changed everyone. I waited. I truly did. But the letters stopped coming for so long. We heard you were gone. Julian was there. He was kind. He was present. Her letters had stopped? No, that wasn't right. He'd written every week, pouring his soul onto paper. He realized then the cruel twist of fate. His last batch of letters must have been lost, delayed in the chaos of the war's end, leaving a silence she had interpreted as his death. By the time his final letters arrived, it was already too late. Julian had filled the void. He looked at the woman before him, a stranger in a familiar form. She had made her choice, not out of malice, but out of a desperate need for security in a world turned upside down. Her family had been struggling, and Julian offered a lifeline. She had traded a dream of love for the reality of survival. He couldn't hate her for it. In a way, the war had claimed them both, just in different ways. Alistair finally found his voice, a quiet strength returning to him. I understand, Clara. I wish you nothing but happiness. He turned and walked away, not looking back. He was leaving behind the boy who had carved his initials into an oak tree and the dream he had carried through the war. It was a pain deeper than any physical wound, but as he walked, he felt a strange sense of release. The past was a ghost, and he could no longer let it haunt him. Months later, Alistair decided to use the skills he'd learned in the army to help rebuild, not just the country, but people's lives. He joined a volunteer effort to construct new homes for families displaced by the war. He found a new purpose in the sweat of his brow and the gratitude in the eyes of strangers. He was no longer a Captain Finch, the jilted lover, but Alistair, the builder. He was building a new life, one brick at a time, on the foundations of a broken heart. One day, while overseeing a project in a neighboring town, a young woman approached him, offering the workers a pitcher of fresh lemonade. Her name was Eleanor, a school teacher, whose laughter was genuine and whose eyes held a quiet strength that reminded him of what it meant to be truly resilient. She didn't see a war hero or a man with a tragic past. She just saw Alistair. They talked for hours, about books, about the future, about the simple joys of a peaceful sky. Wait, Eleanor. There were no ghosts, no shadows of what might have been. There was only the promise of a new beginning. He learned that love wasn't about holding on to a memory, but about having the courage to create new ones. His heart, which he thought was shattered beyond repair, began to feel whole again, not because someone was fixing the broken pieces, but because it was learning to grow in a new shape. Alistair Finch had returned from war expecting to find his old life waiting, but instead, he found a new one, truer and stronger than he could have ever imagined. His greatest victory wasn't won on the battlefield, but in the quiet courage of letting go and starting over. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story of resilience and new beginnings, please like this video and subscribe to Noble Heart Stories for more content that touches the soul. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, take care.